Welcome back to Definitely Not Definitive. I'm Ken.
And I'm Bethany.
And we're just a couple of lunatics in love that love some lore videos.
Yes, we do.
So we're checking out The Beginner's Guide to Elder Scrolls Lore. Elder Scrolls is a game that I played and I've enjoyed. I like Skyrim and Oblivion and all that stuff, but Bethany's never played it before.
So I'm a beginner.
Yeah. While I enjoy playing the games, when I'm in the game, I'm not necessarily reading all the lore as I'm playing it. I'm a little bit more focused on the action, and so there's a lot that I need to learn, and so that's what we're checking this out for. And if you want all of our Elder Scrolls reactions, we got a lot of Elder Scrolls Online stuff that we did as well. Check out the description of this video. We got a playlist there.
Do you have that friend that knows absolutely zero about the Elder Scrolls?
I have that wife
friend that you have spent days trying to artistically explain the inner workings of the ridiculously expansive lore, trying to get them into it. But no one understands your Rain Man-like addiction to this expansive fictional universe. It's leaving you all lonely, sitting in your room by yourself, playing Skyrim for the 100th time, role-playing as a Dunmer mage vampire who used to be a baker in Wayrest. So you want to recruit more people, drag them into this make-believe rabbit hole that seems to never end. Well, here today, I've prepared the most digestible, easy-to-understand primer on the Elder Scrolls lore for those very same people. Welcome to your introduction to the Elder Scrolls lore for dummies. It all begins when the cosmic forces of chaos and order butt heads, and then we have the good old universe called the Orbrus. Some extra stuff happens, but we essentially end up with a bunch of original spirits that inhabit the two planes, Aetherius and Oblivion. One of these spirits was called Lorcan, and he had the great idea to create Mundus, the mortal realm. To do this, Lorcan tricked a bunch of the other spirits into giving up their power in order to create it. These spirits who helped him are called the Aedra, and the ones who didn't help are called the Daedra. They are the ones who chill out in Oblivion. The Daedra are kind of like the closest things to demons in the Elder Scrolls. So these spirits, the Aedra, find out about Lorcan's treachery, and they tear out his heart. One of the Aedric spirits, called Magnus, the dude who designs the mortal realm, and his followers, the Magnagi, run away before they lose all their power, tearing through the barrier of the mortal realm, creating the sun and stars. This is how magic enters. The energy flows from Aetherius through these holes into Mundus. So the Aedra who stayed and finished the creation of the mortal realm mostly lost their power gradually, having to resort to physical breeding and devolving into the mortal races. The most powerful among them remained Aedra, which are later known as the Eight Divines. There is way more nuance to the creation story and different cultural retellings, but this is a version for dummies after all. So are we all on the same page? Aedra created the mortal realm, sacrificing their own power, and a Daedra just chilled in Oblivion. And yeah, magic comes through the sun and stars. So we got the world, what about the people on it? The place all the games are set on is the continent of Tamriel. This disfigured cube is home to many colourful races. There are the lizard folk, the Argonians, and the cat folk called the Khajiit. These are referred to as beast races and are generally believed to have been native to Tamriel. The other two groups of people on Tamriel are humans and elves, also referred to as man and mer, straight ears or pointy ears. The races of man migrated from the northern land of Atmora throughout history, with the exceptions of the Red Guards, who are from the western land of Yakuta, and the elves are from the lost continent of Aldmeris. Got that? Good. So the original elves were called the Oldma, and they came from Aldmeris, and the Oldma split into many different sub-races. The ones who stayed on the Somerset Isles became the Altma with a T, and they resembled the Oldma with a D the most, and they have a hard-on for purity and being superior. The ones who went to Valenwood became the Short Wood Elves, known as the Bosma, who, after making a deal with a forest god, became religiously carnivorous and cannibalistic, vowing to never hurt the plant life of their home. A group of elves from Somerset followed a prophet called Veloth out of there to a new land called Morrowind up here. They followed the words of the Daedra and were staunch ancestor worshippers. They began calling themselves the Chimer, and they would come into conflict with another group of elves called the Dwemer, or dwarves. They are the guys who make all these steampunk machines and have all their awesome advanced tech. These Chimer later turn into the Dunmer, the Dark Elves, and we'll get into that later. A bunch of elves originally tried to stop the Chimer from leaving, but their patron god was eaten and turned into a Daedra, and because of that, they were turned into these green fellas called Orsima, or Orcs for short. Another group of elves who left Somerset were the Aelids, who settled Cyrodiil and built the White Gold Tower. This is the big-ass tower from a oblivion and now serves as the main seat of power for the Empire. The Aelids enslaved a bunch of the men living there, but we'll get to that later. There are also the Durrani elves who moved to High Rock, and also the Snow elves, or the Falmer, who chilled out in the frozen lands of Skyrim. There are some Sea elves, some left-handed elves, and a bunch of other non-important groups.
Left-handed elves?
You get it. There's a lot of elves around, but we covered the main groups of Tamriel. So now for the men. It's a little simpler. Basically, a ton of men came from Atmora and settled in Tamriel over time. The ones who have been in the lands of Cyrodiil, High Rock, and Hammerfell are called the Needs. The Needs in High Rock would become enslaved by the Durrani, and after quite a few centuries of forced coitus and interbreeding, we get the so-called Manmer, half-elf, half-man, aka the Bretons. The Needs in Cyrodiil get enslaved by the Aelids, but later rebel and claim the land for themselves, starting the Empire and becoming the Imperials. The Needs of Hammerfell have a civilization for a while, but then the Redguards come from Yakuta and basically slaughter anything that's not them and claim their new home.
Oh, wow.
Before that though, the Nords come on down from Atmora and through a series of events end up killing the Snow Elves and claiming Skyrim for themselves, establishing an empire of Nords. So now we've established roughly who is who and where is where, let's learn the most important parts of history, the stuff that is essential for you to get the gist of all the political, cultural kind of things going on. So Elder Scrolls History for Dummies, let's go. Tamriel's history is split into 6 eras. The Dawn era, where everything is being created. The Merethic era, where everyone is making their way to Tamriel and interacting and a bunch of mythological stuff is happening. Dragon Wars in Skyrim, Daedra freely walking over Nirn, that kind of stuff. Next is the First era. Early in this period, the Nedic slaves of the Aelids, remember the human slaves in Cyrodiil, well, yeah, they rebelled, led by a slave called Alesia, with some help from a few demigod-type dudes and the Adric god called Akatosh. The slave queen Alesia initiates a rebellion and overthrows the Aelids and founds the Alesian Empire, the first Cyrodiilic empire. Her covenant with Akatosh means that as long as an heir of Alesia, essentially one blessed with the dragon blood, wears the Amulet of Kings and sits atop the ruby throne, then the barrier between Oblivion and Mundus will stay strong, preventing lots of demon dudes from running around the joint. Alesia also synthesized the Nordic pantheon and the Elven pantheon of gods to create the modern imperial interpretations of the gods called the 8 Divines. These are the guys you will commonly hear about, like Kinnereth, Debella, Mara, Stendar, those kind of guys. So that all gets cracking on for a few centuries, and meanwhile in Morrowind, the Kai'ma and the Dwemer finally stop fighting and chum up. Together they team up and kick out the Nords who have been ruling them, but this alliance doesn't last. The tech-savvy Dwemer committed heresy, and they tried to build their own god in the form of a brass golem called the Numidium. They were doing this using the heart of Lorkhan, you know, the same god that tricked the others into creating the mortal realm? That Lorkhan. So they started a war and shit hit the fan, and while meddling with higher powers, the Dwemer made themselves all disappear simultaneously, leaving only their machines and ruins. 3 Kai'ma people, Almalexia, Sothasil, and Vivek, then get to the heart of Lorkhan, and they end up using it to become the living gods called the Tribunal. But they made a promise to one of their Daedric gods, Azura, not to use the heart of Lorkhan, so when they betrayed that promise and became gods, Azura got really mad and turns the entire race of Kai'ma into the Dunmer, the Dark Elves with ash skin and red eyes. The Tribunal now rule Morrowind through a golden age, so stuff keeps happening for a long while, and the Alesian Empire kinda collapses because a religious group of zealots called the Alesian Order ended up controlling it and ruining everything for everyone. So first empire gone, but don't worry, another one comes along. So a group called the Akaviri come to Tamriel to invade. They come from a place called Akavir, which is like the Elder Scrolls Asia, also in the Far East. A guy called Riemann unites Cyrodiil and bravely defeats the Akaviri invasion at Pale Pass. The Akaviri, in awe of their defeat, kneel and pronounce Riemann Dragonborn. Turns out he has dragon blood. Well, Riemann begins the Second Empire of Cyrodiil and the Riemann dynasty. Over a few centuries, he ends up conquering all of the mainland of Tamriel with the exception of Morrowind, and of course, this excludes the Somerset Isles. So the Riemann dynasty unfortunately ends when a conspiracy ends up having Riemann III assassinated, assassinated, his Snake Man Akaviri advisor called Versa Duché announces the beginning of the Second Era, and he and his son rule in place of an emperor for a few more centuries. Fun fact, they both get popped off too, and the Second Empire officially collapses.
Good.
Then we have a new period called the Interregnum, a time when there was no empire, just pretenders to the throne and squabbling warlords in Cyrodiil. This is roughly where the events of the MMO, The Elder Scrolls Online, takes place. Molag Bal, the Daedric prince of many things unpleasant, tried to take over the world, but yeah, that failed, and there was a war going on between 3 alliances, and a bunch of cool DLC stuff happens, but yeah, absolutely none of this is really important in the grand scheme of things, because Tiber Septim rocks up to shake the boat. A man named Tiber Septim was initially serving under a Colovian general, but he was assassinated, and Tiber took charge instead. Tiber Septim turns out to be Dragonborn. He united all of Cyrodiil and created a new empire, the Third Empire, and they got to conquering, as empires do. Meanwhile though, Dagoth the enemy of the Tribunal, the living gods in Morrowind, had arose and cut off the living gods from their source of power, the Heart of Lorkhan. So the Tribunal were in a compromised position. When Tiber Septim came to conquer Morrowind, they instead came to peace terms and signed the Armistice, which allowed Morrowind a lot of autonomy, including allowing them to keep practicing slavery. Part of this exchange was the Numidium, gifted to Tiber Septim by Vivec. The Numidium, if you remember, is the super robot made by the Dwemer. Well, Tiber's battle mage buddy helped him get the Colossus working again, and with it, he devastated the Somerset Isles, bringing the nation of High Elves under his heel. Tiber Septim had officially conquered all of Tamriel and began the Septim dynasty, and with this, the Third Era begins. By the end of his long and ambitious life, he actually ascended to godhood in death and became the 9th Divine Talos, which is important because you'll hear that name a lot. Some 400 years later, the usual strife and political intrigue of an empire all went down, including an emperor imposter and a reactivation of the Numidium. But it is more important to know the events of the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind. You see, the reincarnation of an ancient Chimera hero called the Nerevarine ended up defeating Dagoth by destroying the Heart of Lorkhan, slowly ending the Tribunal's reign as gods. Alma Alexia, one of the gods, actually went a little mad because her godly powers were fading, and she killed Sotha Sil and tried to kill the Nerevarine but failed, and she was killed instead, which left only Vivec standing, or floating, but he would later disappear, and then a little more time went by and we have the events of Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. So a dude named Mankar Cameron started a cult called the Mythic Dawn, which were essentially Mehrunes Dagon's lackeys. Mehrunes Dagon is the Daedric Prince of Destruction, and he wanted to rule Tamriel. They started off with assassinating the Emperor Patrick Stewart, aka Uriel Septim VII, as well as all of his sons. With no Dragonborn ruler, the barrier between Oblivion and Mundus is broken, because remember, Alesia and Akatosh made a covenant that as long as a Dragonblood ruler is on the throne, the barriers are strong. But good thing Uriel couldn't keep his dick in his pants, because it turns out he has a bastard son named Martin Seanbean Septim, the hero of Kvatch, aka the champion of Cyrodiil. The hero of Kvatch, aka the champion of Cyrodiil, helps Martin Septim fight the Mythic Dawn, defeat the Oblivion invasion, and it all ends in a heroic sacrifice of Martin, where he becomes an avatar of Akatosh to defeat Mehrunes Dagon, and the barriers between Oblivion and Mundus stay forever intact. So, the champion of Cyrodiil actually takes a visit to the Oblivion realm called the Shivering Isles and helps a mad god, but then actually mantles the Mad Prince, aka he actually becomes Sheogorath, the Daedric Prince of Madness. But that aside, the Oblivion Crisis, the continent-wide Daedric invasion, caused a lot of problems, and on top of that, a giant volcano called Red Mountain in Morrowind erupts and kills a lot of Dunmer, and on top of that, a bunch of Argonians, the Lizard Men, invade Morrowind and kill a bunch more, in revenge for centuries upon centuries of slavery, so Morrowind kinda gets blown out. Meanwhile, there is no legitimate emperor, and a bunch of provinces secede from the empire. Eventually, a Clovian warlord, Titus Mede, claims the throne, beginning the Mede dynasty, but at the same time, a radical high elf purist government rises to power in the Somerset Isles. These guys are the Thalmor. Over the next 100 or so years, the Wood Elves and the Khajiit, the Cat People, join up with the Thalmor, forming the Eldameri Dominion. 30 years before the events of Skyrim, a great war breaks out between the Empire and the Eldameri Dominion. A lot of terrible stuff happens, but ultimately peace is made. But this peace came at the cost of outlawing Talos worship, which a lot of people were not happy about. And also, Hammerfell was given up to the Thalmor, but the Red Guards weren't having that, so they just left the Empire and fought off the elves themselves and actually won. So now it's the year 201 of the 4th era, and the dragons are back in Skyrim causing trouble, and there's also a civil war going on between the Empire and the Stormcloaks. But don't worry, you're the Dragonborn, you could absorb dragon souls and use dragon shouts to save Tamriel from the dragon menace. Yeah, there are a lot of dragons and dragon-related things in Skyrim, but I'll just let you jump into that for yourself. So, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, all of the context required, so hopefully, by the end of that whole spiel, you are no longer an Elder Scrolls lore dummy, but now an Elder Scrolls lore smarty. The lore is so expansive, there is so much more to find out, but this guide will have given you the necessary context and general understanding, so that when you play Skyrim for the first time, you kind of get what's happening. Be sure to check out the wealth of other in-depth lore videos we have covering all corners of the Elder Scrolls universe. Give the video a like if this helped you out or helped a friend out, and now you have a friend to talk about Elder Scrolls lore with. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Scott from Forge Muppet, and I'll be back to nerd out with you again next time.
All right, so I would not say Elder Scroll smarty, still a dummy in that, but talked pretty fast. Not so fast that I couldn't understand what he was saying, but it was still pretty fast.
I think he did a good job, and I think it had the same feel as like watching, here are the events of the American Revolution and how we've gotten to where we are today. Like one of those videos, like here's like a couple centuries worth of history packed into a 10-minute video is kind of how it felt. And because I haven't played Elder Scrolls yet, I'm not anchored right now. So it was very informative, and I received the information. I don't know that I absorbed any of it. Like it kind of washed over me a little bit. So I learned some things, and I think if I were to now play Elder Scrolls and then maybe watch it again, I would feel a lot more rooted into it, and like, you know, I'd have a stake in the game. So I would be more, I think, attuned to what was going on, and therefore able to better piece it all together. Right now it was just very foreign to me, but I thought they did a good job presenting information, and I do feel like I learned something from it, even though I'm sure I gleaned like 25% of what was a hugely informative video that after playing, maybe I'll at least get somewhere in the ballpark of 75%.
I like when he would bring up characters that he'd already talked about, like he would call back to what, like, you know, this is how you, like, I've talked about this person before. Here's what I talked to them about. You know, remember this person that like tricked all the other gods into creating like the world and the earth and everything like that. It helps that that he assumed that, you know, you're not gonna remember everything that you just said. There's a lot of information in here, so I'm just gonna have to keep repeating things. You can't assume everyone knows exactly what you're talking about, especially if it's like a beginner's guide to Elder Scrolls lore. You're gonna wanna assume that everyone's a beginner that's gonna be watching it.
Well, yeah, I mean, even when you learn history in school, I mean, how many times did we, as we advanced in our years in schooling, we would go back to some of the same things or study some of the same pieces, and it's because repetition is necessary for memory and to like really supplant something in your brain, which then becomes necessary to be able to create those connections, draw the parallels, get greater understanding and context of like a certain time period or a certain person. And one thing that definitely stuck out to me as a character, because since everything is so foreign to me, it's like I don't have a hook in that way. So all I can go off of is like what I've heard in this video and like, ooh, Alicia, she sounds so cool. So like that was one where I'm like, I probably retained more of that little piece of story than anything else, only because like one, from the very beginning, I was like, oh, that's a cool statue. I wonder who she is. And then the story of like, she is the queen of slaves who overthrew. I was like, yes, go girl. Like that is awesome. That is like the special mention out of this, just because that was something that really stuck with me.
I liked the map and him breaking down the different races, where they are, how they originated, you know, and where they ended up settling. I thought that was good, and that was like my sort of like highlight, and like that was like part that like I kind of maybe was, I don't want to say that I was paying attention the most during that part. Like, so it's not like I wasn't paying attention to the rest of the parts, but like that's, I guess, the one that I was able to absorb a little bit more. Y'all let us know what you thought about this down below in the comments, and if you're an Elder Scrolls beginner or a pro, let us know what you thought, and if this was informative. And more Elder Scrolls videos to check out. Let us know in the comments. If you see a comment you agree with, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Thanks so much for checking out our reaction for Elder Scrolls Lore Beginner's Guide, but just keep in mind
that our reaction is definitely not definitive.